Sexy man.
Welcome. You are listening to Two Girls, One Podcast. Damn it, I keep forgetting this is not that podcast. I didn't put on a sexy Tina voice for this. This episode won't be sexy at all, actually. It's the opposite of sexy, if I must say so myself.
Yeah, it's a feel good episode, and you'll have a good outlook on life.
Yeah, we are back with Oblivion by David Foster Wallace. Today's story we're covering is Good Old Neon, which is, it's all about fraudulence and cliches. That's what I'll say. Do you want to give the brief synopsis? Because we don't really need the detailed synopsis, because this whole story is just about a whining yuppie for the most part. By the way, I can honestly say I am not currently at the state of my life where I relate to this book. If I read this in my 20s, I think it would have had a good impact on me, negative, positive, just some kind of impact. But now I'm indifferent, so I would say I'm pretty indifferent from this. I don't have any depressive issues anymore. I don't have any of those, am I an imposter? Am I putting on a show for other people? I'm not now. I'm 35. I don't give a fuck what people think about me. I'm one of those assholes now. Like, I'm just like, whatever. If I'm wearing yoga pants in public or a thong or, whatever, I wouldn't care. Like, it doesn't matter. If I'm wearing a dirty hoodie with fucking ketchup stains and my wife's yelling at me, you look like a slob. Who the fuck cares? I tell her that all the time because I do stupid shit in public to embarrass her. She goes, quit, everybody's looking. I'm like, who are we impressing? We don't know any of these people. I do that all the time. I do that at weddings where we do know people. But still, why are we impressing these people? They don't give a shit. They're worried about themselves. Yeah, it's Pennsylvania. Who gives a fuck?
Oh, man. That was brutal. All right. Yeah, you're on one.
Oh, yeah, I'm in a mood today.
Let's see. The story is about a dude. I think his name's Neil.
I don't think a real name, but that's the name you get.
Oh, yeah.
I would say, to spoil the ending real quick, it's pretty much just David Foster Wallace. Is that a correct assumption? Like, the story's made up, but it's his ideas for the most part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could say that about a lot of things there, Kayla.
Everything's David Foster Wallace. Every book, everything's just David Foster Wallace. Turns out there are no authors, no Stephen King, no Dr. Seuss, no J.K. Rowling, all Wallace.
All Wallace all the time.
What nightmare Oblivion are we living in?
Wallace. Dude is struggling with feeling inauthentic, or as he puts it, inauthentic, but it's like he's just in the perpetual need for approval from absolutely everyone at all times. And so he feels like he's a fraud because he's not doing anything necessarily just for himself, because he gets wrapped up in, being concerned about putting on something to impress other people or gain other people's gratitude or appreciation or adulation or whatever like that, except for some weird yogi kind of guy that he thinks sees through him and his fake charade, but is not totally convinced that he did see. It's weird. And then he kills himself
in a fiery car crash.
And then he's outside of space-time. Then he sees some dude named David Wallace or David Foster or something like that. Which I was like, wow, that's a tricky name right there. I don't
know who that could be.
Mourning the loss of this dude that apparently they went to school together, and David Wallace thought that the dude had his life together, even though he didn't. And
it was all a facade.
It's all a fascade.
I thought this story was pretty interesting. This actually really reminds me of No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, because that is a story, granted it's set in older Japan, but that is a story about a guy who puts on an act for everybody else. It's pretty much the exact same story, except for this is about a yuppie in, 1991 is when he kills himself, apparently. And this guy's whole issue is he puts on this facade, he puts on this act for everybody else. He's a fraud, and he knows he's a fraud. It started when he was 4 years old, when he realized he broke a fancy bowl that was like an antique from his, I guess he's adopted, his foster mother's grandmother or something gave it to him. But he broke it, And when the parents confronted him, he lied, but he did it in a way to manipulate them, which he didn't know at the time. But then that's what sparked I can just manipulate everybody and be a fucking sociopath. So at 4 years old, he tells the lie in a way that makes it sound like he's just covering it up, that his sister, his adopted sister, I guess, well, she's the biological, so she's not adopted.
Yeah.
But his stepsister, I guess you would say, is blamed for it because he makes it seem like he was covering up for her breaking it. And then he realized, whoa, this is like a real power, man. And then he goes through his whole life being super successful in life, but doing it in a way that it's just to impress other people. So think of like the rich guy who has the perfect house, the perfect family, all these cars, and ends up fucking killing himself because he's actually not happy because he just did this all to impress other people. It's not what he actually wanted out of life.
It's America. He's talking about America.
America. And I actually just made a post on this earlier for DPW for those who want to check out. Which I don't know when this episode will drop. So what was the name of the post? The Mask of a Fraud, I think it is. It is just pretty much about the fraud topic here. And I give a quick example of Hemingway's life. I think Hemingway was a good example of someone who became the fraud without, his was partially deliberate. He created this image that he wanted everyone to see him as. He wanted everyone to see him as the masculine, hunter, boxer, this guy. And while that might have been him to a degree, obviously he amplified that by thousands to make it over the top, to the point where if you think of Hemingway now, a lot of people might not know his writing. They just know Hemingway, the character that he created. Yeah. So it actually overtook his life. The fraud overtook the real him. And I think you could kind of say that happened to Hunter S. Thompson too.
Maybe I don't know too much about.
Well,
Hunter
if you
S.
think
Thompson's
most people think of Hunter S. Thompson, they think a crazy drug addict, wild man. And while he was that, that wasn't necessarily all he was. Obviously, like he was an author, he was a great writer. What? But most people know him as the fucking druggy guy. And
they know him as Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp's a good example. Most people see Johnny Depp in a very certain way now that he might not actually be that. And that's most, celebrities. Which goes to the root of a deeper societal problem is what you see now, TikTok and Instagram and all this shit. It's easier to expose yourself to the world. No pun intended. That's a pun, but people with the OnlyFans and all that. But
it's a dick.
It's a flaccid cock, but then it gets big. No. What are you doing, buddy? There's a dog run down. He wants food, but I already gave you food. But the problem is, like, everyone has a voice now, which is good to a degree, but, not everybody should have a voice. And now it's all, look at me, look at me. And it's not necessarily just narcissism, because we like to just say, oh, everybody's narcissistic. I think a lot of people just want to stand out from the crowd because everybody's doing the exact same thing. So they just like, nobody sees me. I want to be seen. But then that becomes the facade. You put on this act for everyone. And then another example I used in the post was you think of the people that have like the positive social media accounts. Like you think of the TikTok where it's all about body positivity and being your authentic self and all that. Well, the person that is doing that, while they might be genuine in their message, they're still doing it in a way where it's how they want you to see them. It's how they want you to perceive them. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's 100% their actual thoughts all the time, because nobody just thinks like that all the time. Everyone's very different, and we're all very layered, I'd like to think anyway. Some people might not be, but
like nachos.
Yeah, deep nachos. But I think that going back to the fraudulence of this David Foster Wallace story, to just completely make a different segue here, if we go back to him being, is this really just his thoughts and being about David Foster Wallace? Because I do get that impression before we get to the whole ending where it keeps saying David Foster Wallace and stuff like that. Like, just his thoughts and whatever. Oh, shit, I lost my train of thought because stupid husky. What do you want, bro?
Sorry, if there's howling in the background over here, it's my child.
There's howling back over here, it's my child.
Wait, what?
What? My dog, he's my child. He's got paws, but he's a baby. But I think, anyway, so in this story, I think Wallace is expressing his fear of being a fraud. And I think because he was such a smart guy that, he probably did analyze everyone. Because the main character in the story, he ends up going to an analysis, I think it was, pretty much like a therapist, who he ends up analyzing more than the therapist analyzes him, and he ends up manipulating him. And this guy's problem is he doesn't want to manipulate people. He knows he's a fraud, but he doesn't know how to stop being a fraud. And I kind of think that maybe that's how Wallace felt, because he ultimately ended up killing himself. And I think maybe that had to do with, he had very severe depression.
Yeah.
And it was like, he got off his medicine because he had some kind of reaction and it stopped working. And that's what led to that. But, I'm sure he still had ideas of, we were talking about the imposter syndrome. A lot of very intelligent people tend to go through that, where it's like, do people really care about what I think and what I'm saying? Or is it just, I just want them to care about what I think and what I'm saying, but they don't actually care. And then you start like doubting yourself, and you get into this weird headspace where it's like everything I put out is garbage and nobody really cares about me. But like my view on it, and like I said, I'm in a different place in life now than I used to be, where this story I'm more indifferent to, because the way I think about it is I don't have to impress other people because they're not really looking at me. They're worried about themselves. Like most people actually don't care about what you're doing. A good example is if you just got offline forever, like if you had a semi-big following on something, and then you just got off and just stopped talking. No, you didn't really talk about it. Like, it's like, hey, see you folks. And then you were just done. Most people just really wouldn't care. Like they probably wouldn't even notice, a lot of them. And then you just disappeared. And then if you come back, like, oh, Caleb's back. Where the hell have you been? Like they don't look beyond their own lives that much. And I think we're all a little selfish in that regard. It's very rare that somebody goes, hey, you know what? What the fuck happened to Bob, who used to always post on Twitter every Monday his Manic Monday rants? I haven't seen that guy in a long time. Then you find out Bob fucking killed himself or something because he had a Manic Monday. Like, but you might not realize that for a year because Bob wasn't that big a part of your life. So I think social media creates this, this falsity of image. Like we think that we're more important than we really are. We think people care more than they really do. But usually it's people just want you to care about them. They don't really care what you're doing that much unless it relates to how they're doing. You see that a lot with celebrities, which makes me like just ill. I always see like when The Rock posts something on Instagram, if you go on there, it's just like say he posts a workout video or something. It's 1,000 celebrities going, yeah, get it, brother. Oh yeah, fire, fire, fire. Yeah, fucking cool. And then it's just like, those people don't give a fuck about what The Rock's doing. They just want the people in his comments to see them and go to their profile. Like that's all it is. It's fucking so ridiculous. Like this, almost like I scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of thing. Except for they don't care about your itches. Like, yeah,
it's more of like how we've talked about a lot of the indie scene or the self-published authors on social media will just be like, hey, buy my
told you,
hey, buy my book. Buy my book and I'll buy yours, and you can we'll review each other and really just lift everyone up and
nothing
all
happens.
That stuff. And it's just like a gigantic ring of people. Like, there is no follow through. Everyone's got their hands on each other's dicks, but nobody's pumping. So it's like
just a lot of dry chafing on the dick.
It's like, okay, are you gonna do something or are you gonna put it down? Hey, Nacho.
I gotta go take care of this fucking guy. Apparently he needs more food because he's yelling at me again. I let him down here. I took off his jangly chains, and he has to be seen. So
did his chain hang low?
I'll be back in a minute. And we're back. So anyway, like I was saying, David Foster Wallace harbors ill will towards the Jewish community. Did you know? No.
Damn.
What happened?
Wow. A lot changed. Wow. Somebody needs a Snickers.
Oh, jeez Louise. Anyway, so this story also had some things that happened with some stuff and a guy and a lady. And now this was an interesting character breakdown about somebody who's completely infatuated with themselves pretty much, but to a degree where it's all about how others view them. And like I said, I don't think this story needed to be quite this long just to get the point. I didn't mind the length. I'm just saying, like, I didn't like to get the point across. I didn't think all the, because it breaks down into very like different stories to show how this guy, well, you know what? Actually, I'm full of shit because there's a couple, like a good bit in the beginning and middle where the guy, it's so well written because the guy, since he wants to impress everybody, even the audience he's telling the story to, he wants to impress. So he keeps commenting on how he knows that he's kind of rambling at times and how he keeps talking too much. And that comes across to me, at least it came across to me, as he's still trying to impress people. And he knows he's trying to impress people, but he just can't stop because he's fucking apparently mentally ill.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool thing. Is like it reads really smooth. At least I thought it. There's a lot more breaks in the paragraphs. There's a lot more, I guess, traditional sentence structure. And so I thought it read really smooth. It had a pretty good pace. I wouldn't say that the pacing was perfect. It did seem a little strung out, especially when he spent a long time on the yogi meditation class. I really like the church thing that he was talking about, though. It kind of made me laugh.
I like the way he broke down the spirit and the smacking of the heads and the talking in tongues and how he knew it was bullshit, but he fell for it anyway because he wanted the pastor and whatnot to like him and think he was really devoted and had the spirit. But he was so self-absorbed that he didn't realize the people around him were full of shit. Like, he was like, oh, yeah, I just had it. Like, he smacked me in the head and I fell back and I knew I didn't have the spirit. I'm just pretending. But, the guys next to me, they had the spirit. No, they didn't either. Like, that's the whole thing about this story is he never stopped to think that maybe nobody gave a shit about what he was doing, or maybe they were all frauds too. Like, I don't think he mentioned once that other people were frauds as well. Did he?
No, I don't think so. And that's one thing I was wondering. I was like, okay, so this dude has some issues because he's I think we would traditionally say he's extremely self-absorbed. I would almost posit that it's not so much a fraudulence or a self-absorbed as like he's paranoid the entire time is what I took from it, because he's viewing his life from the eye holes of another person. And the only way to be free of that is either to be completely alone or to essentially what happened in the end of the movie is to die. So, or not movie, it plays like a movie, but no, is to die. But then, and what I found kind of weird is that at the very end, he's all like, oh yeah, in the afterlife, everything's happening all at the same time. You gain this grand kaleidoscope of perception. It's really difficult to explain. He tries like 3, 4, 5 different ways. And yet the entire time he's still changing his wording and he's still like pandering to the people reading it. And then kind of like, I didn't take it like he could see everything that's happening. I took it as like he understood everything in his life. And so him kind of looking down and seeing David Wallace or whatever the dude's name was, David Foster, I don't know, DFW. And then like, I was like, he wouldn't be able to understand and perceive the innermost workings of that guy's thoughts and everything like that. And so he's doing the exact same thing. He's not free of it. He can't be free of this. And so it's just, he's always going to live his life. Even when he's dead, he's going to die his death through the eyes of others. And it was like,
well, his whole death scene, he took a bunch of Benadryl and crashed into a brick wall out in the country. And the whole reason for going out in the country was because he didn't want to die in such a way where he would have others think, oh man, he did this to be spectacular and have this big explosion. But then at the same time, he also thought, well, they're going to think this anyway. And they're going to think, oh man, he died such a painful way. And just all this stuff. Like, so even his death was through the eyes of other people, which is strange because if he just stopped to think that, hey, maybe other people feel this way too, maybe they're frauds too, he wouldn't have killed himself, because he would have realized that, and again, I don't know if he was capable of realizing this, that what he was going through wasn't necessarily unique. It's just that he was obsessive. And the degree of obsessiveness, like if you go back to the meditation story, where he's in a meditation class and he gets dubbed the statue because he's the only one that could hold a meditation forever, but he's not really meditating. He's just doing it because other people are watching him and he hates it and he's very uncomfortable and his whole body's on fire and he's cramping and all this stuff. But he holds it just because others are there. But when he tried to do it at home, he couldn't even hold it for a couple minutes. So he didn't do the at-home meditation exercises, and he was a fraud. And he thought that the guru guy knew that he was a fraud. He felt that guy knew and could see right through him and knew this was all an act and all this stuff. And he goes on and on about that. But did the guy really know? I mean, why would he really, what sane person would think someone else knows that you're a fraud? Like, he probably just thought, oh, he's good at meditating. Like, I'm sure the guy didn't really look into it like that.
Yeah, the guy was probably just holding a class. We're talking about him as if he's real, but probably just holding a class because he had bills to pay and all this crap. And I think the main character, Neil, talks about how he was thinking about going and asking, talking to the guru or the yogi or whoever it is, and being all like, hey, how did you see through me? How did you know I was a fraud? Is there a way of getting over this? But he kind of like chicken shits out and never goes back and never like signs up for the advanced seminar that is next. He's like, I'm not going to that.
No,
like,
he actually pays for it, but he can't even ask for a refund because he's so like, he doesn't want to face it. But what he does instead of doing what he wants to do, which is, talk to this guru and see how he knows that he's a fraud, he goes to an analyst who he knows isn't going to find out that he's a fraud, even though he tells him. He knows the guy isn't going to give him the answers he wants. He's going to give him the answers that he can use to manipulate the doctor. And then he ends up analyzing the doctor and coming up with all these things that might not even have been true about him being a homosexual and having these hidden desires that he's pushing onto the patients and all this nonsense. And I was like, again, is any of that true, or is that just because you were a crazy person who's just putting all this on someone else?
Yeah, there was a huge degree of narcissism. I don't necessarily play this out or see this as a tragedy. When the first read through, I could see it. Okay, well, this is more of a tragic story. But then once you start thinking about it and recognizing signs, you can have an elementary education in psychology. You can have a rudimentary understanding of what narcissism is. And you're like, this dude was narcissistic. He was like a paranoid, narcissistic personality that was always concerned about what other people thought about him and always thought that he knew what other people were doing or thinking or going to say or how they were going to react and all this stuff. And so I was just like, dude, it's self-fulfilling, because if he's going to try to assume that, oh, well, person A is, if I approach them in this way and talk in this way and behave in this way, then they're going to react in this way. It's like, well, if this is a social setting, then that's just showing that you understand how to behave in public. Like it has nothing else to do with that. It's like, that's not grand manipulation. If it's your parents, like your foster parents or adopted parents, and you know that they favor you and they're afraid for your life and all this stuff, then yeah, you're going to be able to get away with stuff a lot easier. I was like, this isn't grand. Like, it's not even necessarily that this guy's super smart. It's not like he's a CEO of anything.
He definitely had delusions of grandeur. He thought he was way more important and insightful, and he could like point out these things in people that they can't see in themselves. And that's probably not even true. Like he just thought he was this amazing, incredible person, because he goes on about how people are going to see him as such a great guy, and why did he kill himself and all this stuff. And it's like, you're really narcissistic. Like I wouldn't like that guy. I want to bring something up to you, and this might be a stretch. Okay. And I'm going to bring it up to you just for your general opinion, and then I'm going to go back and we can follow the lines to what led to this conclusion of mine. Kelsey Grammer from Frasier killed David Foster Wallace. Agree or disagree?
No, I'm going to...
Okay, let me explain myself.
Okay.
So our protagonist here, Neil, who really is an extension of David Foster Wallace, according to the end of this book, is a man who kills himself, and what brought about this to fruition, at least, is that he watched an episode of Cheers where Frasier Crane, the character Frasier Crane, and the other female character, who are both, I guess, psychologists, are discussing on the show Cheers. There's a brief joke about, I'm not sure which one says it, but, oh, how was your day or something? And it was like something along the line, I'm going to paraphrase here, something along the lines of, I think I'm going to go crazy if I have to listen to one more yuppie talk about how they're not loved or how they can't love or something along those lines. And this ruins the guy, this Neil character. Ruins him, and is what pretty much leads to his suicide, because he hears how the audience laughs and realizes this old episode of Cheers, like everyone felt like this and everyone knows, but his opinions that he's a fraud, his ideas that he's a fraud and all this stuff, it's not unique. It's like everyone already knows this stuff. Yuppies and the whole thing, it's just bullshit. And so he kills himself. And I'm thinking, So if that's how if David Foster Wallace felt like that, that meant he watched that episode of Cheers, which means he felt something from that line from Frasier Crane, which means that he was aware of the feelings of people towards yuppies and this kind of thought process about being a fraud. So if Wallace had an imposter syndrome, if he did feel imposter syndrome and Frasier Crane expedited that feeling in himself, could it be that Kelsey Grammer's existence caused David Foster Wallace to kill himself?
Oh my gosh!
Or is that a stretch?
No, I'm going to say that's a stretch.
I just wanted to fucking be ridiculous for a moment. David Foster Wallace killed himself like 20 years after the story, so I don't think that was the catalyst for it. But wouldn't that be some shit if Kelsey Grammer was the reason we lost one of America's greatest authors? Like, that would be such hog shit.
Kelsey Grammer is like America's like silly uncle or something like that.
America's fake British guy.
Yeah. He doesn't even speak with a British accent. That's what I don't get.
I don't know what accent that is. Rich guy accent?
Very specific, precise, enunciated verbiage. And it's like, I don't know why that comes across as British, but you always think Kelsey Grammer. Oh yeah, British dude. He's American.
It sounds like it. I need to look up some articles. I'm sure somebody out there has had that same thought and broke it down in a way that I, off the top of my head, did not. But if Foster Wallace killed himself because of stupid Frasier Crane, I'm going to be very mad because I never liked Frasier. I wasn't a big Cheers guy either, honestly. And George Wendt almost ran me over in person at a Comic-Con once, so I came barreling down like a fucking freight train. And once that guy because he's pretty big now, once he gets going, he can't stop. And I just happened to walk in front of him, and I almost got wiped out. So yes, folks, I almost got killed by Norm from Cheers, and almost knocked me down and trampled me like a buffalo. But also fucking Lou Ferrigno did that to me too once. I almost got killed by Lou Ferrigno. And strangely enough, almost headbutted in the gonads by a very young Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things. So at a Comic-Con.
That's not something you want to brag about.
No, but she was like 11 years old.
Yeah, that's especially something you don't want to talk about.
And I'm walking through a crowded convention in Cleveland, and all of a sudden somebody bumps into me, and I hear in a British accent, "Excuse me," or some shit, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry." And I look down, and then these big hulking bodyguards come up, like, "Get out of the way!" Like, what the fuck? And everyone's like, "Oh, girl from Stranger Things." Before she was really famous, like the first season just came out, ran into me, and I almost fucking could have just kneed her right in the face on accident, just wiped her out. And boy, would I got some shit for that one. So it's like anytime I have interactions with celebrities in any of these conventions, it's always me or them almost getting, running into one another. So the only one I actually wanted to run me over was Henry Winkler, and that didn't happen. He's awesome. Very nimble on his feet, believe it or not. Hey.
Yes, he is. Very spry.
Oh my God, my back. So conclusions should be drawn here. What do you rate this story? I give it a solid 4 out of 5. I liked it.
Yeah, I'd do 3 to 4, at least 3.5.
3.5 I think is more accurate. I didn't know we were doing halves, but yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I think it read really well. I liked some of the imagery and the anecdotes in there. I think towards the end, the ending was just too ambiguous with being all like, oh, if this really is from a narcissistic, paranoid individual and their viewpoint, it's like, I can't even trust that he's actually dead, or I don't know. It was just like,
it was a good character. It was a good character. Like
it's like a Holden Caulfield.
Yeah. Like it kind of reminded me of like a more intelligent version of Trump, like this guy who just very egomaniacal and is always right. And even though this guy is aware that he's not always right, he just, he's a fraud. So he just feels like his opinions are above everyone else's, even though he only cares about other people's opinions. It's weird. What I did not like about the story, the main thing I did not like about it was the whole talk about cliches and the fact that the main character pretty much kills himself because he realizes his life is a cliche joke from Cheers about yuppies. And David Foster Wallace, because I was thinking about reading Infinite Jest, but I'm not now. And the main reason is, one, I don't necessarily jive with his writing style. All that, like his shorter stories, such as the one with the baby, I forget something scorned or burned babies, children.
Yeah, the Incarnation.
Yeah, that one. And then even The Soul Is Not a Smithy, I really liked his writing style in that. But when he does this like complex, adds mathematics and all this random shit and has huge blocks of text, I don't necessarily enjoy that, but the main takeaway I don't seem to like about Wallace is he talks about things that I really don't care about, such as ad agencies, capitalism, yuppies, and rich people in the 80s, and stock market type folks. Like Gordon Gekko types, like all that shit I just never cared about. Even when it came to like Fight Club, the whole capitalism is bad angle, I just didn't give a shit about that part. Like I like to punch it in the face, but just like just like all this, things that deal with like the economy and stuff and numbers and all this shit, I don't care because I have too many things in my life to worry about. Like we were talking off air, I can't be consumed with that kind of stuff. And I feel like his work is mainly consumed with those kind of ideas. Like I said, the reason why I like that child story so much was because that was real. That was human. Like that was a look into what people would actually feel. And while this story did that, it did that from more of an analytical way, in my opinion. It did that from, like I said, like how that no longer human, it was about a guy pretty much like this guy who it was all about how other people perceived him. But that still had like an overarching story. It wasn't just this guy and how he feels all the fucking time. Like there was other things happening. There were other things in the story happening that just wasn't this guy. I might be more interested in it, but that seems to be Wallace's work. It tends to lean towards the analytical side of fiction, which I don't generally go for. I wanted to read Gravity's Rainbow, but I feel like that might be a similar thing. I haven't read Pynchon yet, but
I was about to say that's not David Foster Wallace.
No, I know, but I just from my understanding, I think Thomas Pynchon also kind of writes in that vein, like that more. Yeah, like I said, I haven't read his work at all, so I can't really judge. But just from what I've heard about like Gravity's Rainbow and stuff, because that was on my list, because it was that and Infinite Jest, the two big tombs that I think Gravity's Rainbow is actually only like 700 pages, but it's probably dense. Yeah. But I think that's more like this kind of analytical fiction where you're looking at life and in the terms of almost from like a fucking robot or something. I don't know. I'm not about fiction like that necessarily. I want more human levels of emotion and feelings, and I want these elements to my fiction to be something that can hit you more deeply than intellectually. Maybe that makes me a lover of YA fiction that I just haven't gotten around to reading. I don't know, but I like more human character-driven stories versus like the fucking Mr. Squishy where it's about the fucking makeup of cookies and stuff. Like I don't care about the chemical aspects of delicatessence and stuff. Like I don't care about that stuff. Yeah, like delicacies, like treats, chocolates, and the mousse topping and all this stuff.
Moose topping.
Now your dogs are barking.
Yeah, they're being assholes.
So did you take away? You said you liked the story originally. Like, did you take away?
Yeah, the more I think about it, and as the book in general, it's. I think my issue with his writing is not necessarily the analytical thing, or because it's kind of interesting. I can't say that it's like totally enjoyable, but I do find it really interesting to read, like sort of a computer, like you said, a computer program's analysis of. What is this human? What is going on? Very detached from reality, sort of thing, or detached from the situation. But my issue is that there's a lot of poking and supposition about what could be wrong. And then there's absolutely not even a hint of a possible solution.
No follow-up on anything.
Absolutely. And so it's like, it's all dark, it's all gloomy. And I think a lot of people might get tricked into thinking like, oh man, he was just a super depressed guy. And like, he's telling us there's nothing the world can do. I was like, no, he's not even trying to find a solution in this, which is fine for certain stories and occasional stories. I get that. But if it's like every story and if the rest of his work follows in this trend, then it's like, well, he's not really helping in any way. He's just pointing out that there's a problem and being like, and everyone's like, oh shoot, yeah, there is. How do we do this? He's like, I don't know. Do it.
Well, that kind of goes along with last episode's discussion about another pioneer where, like we were talking about the analytical AI aspect of his writing, because that story had a lot to do with AI and the human CPU and all this stuff. And one big component of that story was that you can have bad data and that would result in bad answers. So if you input a bad question, you're going to get a bad answer in response. So like the way this story and most of these stories go, like you said, they don't have a solution. It's just pretty much the question is all he does is he gives you this scenario and then you just have to come up with what happens. Like even the Scalding Children story, 2.5-page story about a kid who gets burned. There is no solution to that. There is no outcome. We talked about it as if it was just an origin for a greater story in the future, but he doesn't even, he didn't bother with that. He just told you this small event that happened and never followed up on it. And then, that's most of these stories. There's no follow-up to anything. It's just, I'm going to present you with this as a fact, or even though it's fiction, just I'm going to present this guy's story as a fact as I see it, and then you just have to interpret it any way you want. And there is going to be no answers for you because I didn't even bother to input good or bad data. I just gave you, the source code, and that's it. There's nothing after this. You're not going to get any explanation. It's not, what's the answer to life? And then it's 42 from Hitchhiker's Guide. There's not even the question. We just, all we get is just life. He just shows us life. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no question. There's no answer. It's just very cut and dry and somber and depressing. I would like to see an upbeat story, but you finished this, right? So I'm imagining there's no upbeat stories to be had.
Not really, no. And I've seen the Reddit posts of all the younger guys that are just jacking off to how great he is and how nobody understands his writing except for them and all this stuff. And it's shut up. But
it's the exact same guy that posts on all those, I swear. Because I was looking at those too, and I was like, are these all the same guy? They sound exactly the same as they break this down. They must have all took the same course in college.
Probably. And then it's so what have we done? We've done 5 stories so far.
Yes, sir. We have.
All of them don't have endings, is what I've been kind of thinking over it, trying to think, okay, what was my favorite beginning? What was my favorite message? What was my favorite ending? I was like, they don't even really have endings. And it's not that they have an open ending, because an open ending is oh, shoot, this ended. Where is it going? Oh my gosh, there's no clear answer, or no clear direction, but that it's moving. And that would be an open ending. But this doesn't even have an ending because he ends it, and then he'll spend a couple paragraphs talking about something that has nothing to do with anything. It's like the burned children story. At the very end, they're rushing to the hospital. They're doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden the baby's outside of himself and he's growing big and he's walking and he's talking. I'm like, what is this? And what? And then, Mr. Squishy, the guy is starting to vomit and all this stuff on his desk. And I'm just like, guy, I know Stephen King has a problem with bad endings, but you might actually have him beat, dude. This isn't even hinting at an ending. This is just sort of oh, shoot, I lost steam. I'm done.
It's all philosophy to think about without any solutions or there's no end goals to these stories. So you get David Wallace's philosophy on things and the way he thought about things, but you don't get any kind of satisfaction from it, in my opinion. I don't feel in this story, okay, it's a look on how people feel in society about how others view them and how important that is and the kind of way that could play on your mind. But then there's no, the guy kills himself, but then he goes into fucking infinity and times in a second and all this shit's happening. And I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? The whole ending, I was just like, what the fuck does this have to do with the story at all? Is it even important? And that's what I keep coming away with these stories. None of this is important. And is that the whole debate we had before with Cormac McCarthy's fucking nihilism? Is it if nothing matters, then what's the point of reading this? Why should I even think about this then? It doesn't serve me. All it does is, if anything, hinder me. Because if I read stories like this, I might get depressed. But that's about it. I'm not going to feel upbeat. I'm not going to think about things. You know what? Maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe I should really think about that and fix myself. But then again, maybe that's just coming from my headspace. Maybe if you could relate to the character in the story, maybe it would help you out. I don't know. I don't feel like it would, but
I don't. Yeah, I was like, the dude kills himself. I don't think there's any lesson here other than don't kill yourself and maybe don't be a dick. I don't know.
Fraser Crane's making you kill yourself, fucking Jesus. The next story we have, actually, I think we should, in the next episode, we can cover 2. I'll have to get your opinion on this. Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. It's only 12 pages or 8 pages.
I think I actually like that one.
Yeah, but that's 8 pages. So can we spend the whole episode on that, or should we do that and because you said you hated Oblivion, so
I hated Oblivion.
So maybe we won't talk about that one as much because I might not make it through it
together. We can be like, Oblivion was stupid, And going back to philosophy.
So next episode, we'll cover Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature, because I'll at least read that one. And then we'll do Oblivion, the title story. And then that leaves us with the Suffering Channel, which we'll do in the final wrap-up episode.
I don't even know how to feel about that one.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about any of these, honestly. I'm devoid of feelings because I'm an emotionless robot who just analyzes other people's behavior and their supposed emotions, but I can't understand their emotions because I'm a robot. And then I'm going to write a book about it, and I'm going to make millions of dollars, and I'll be David Foster Wallace. I'm sure David Foster Wallace had feelings. I just don't think any of them were good.
Yeah, I think he kept them locked up too often, didn't let them out, so they're like the emaciated children in a cellar.
Yeah. Anyway, folks, we thank you for listening, and we hope you took something away from this. I can honestly say I did not take much away from this story that I can use in my everyday life, though it did inspire me to create a very short. I actually made it on my Facebook author page, which I haven't updated in like a fucking year. So I was like, I should probably write something for this, and I was like, hey, what about frauds? And then I just did a whole copy and paste, but on DPW for the people who don't follow Facebook, because I don't blame you. Anyway, folks, we thank you for listening, and we will check you out next episode.